Hi, and welcome to Consider This. I'm Sharaad, KUTTAN, and Merry Christmas to all of you. Of course, you've probably been sharing greetings, and we had just a few days ago, in fact, Her Royal Highness, the Permaisuri Agong, also sharing her greetings on Twitter, something that perhaps is going to be the future of greetings, all electronic. We've gotten rid of cards, it seems. Now, to help me with a discussion about Christmas and also the meaning of Christianity in Malaysia, I have with me Father Gerard Tervarium, who is parish priest of the Church of the Divine Mercy at Shah Alam. And I know I've just mangled your name, so we can begin perhaps with me kind of trying to get a sense of the meaning of Christmas. We know there's a lot of bunting out there, and people associate Christmas with Christmas trees. I mean, even here in AWANI, we have a Christmas tree going. And of course, Netflix recently aired a film about called The Two Popes, which is really about the movement between Pope Benedict to the current Pope, Pope Francis. Father Gerard, how do you view Christmas? I mean, kind of very quickly, what's your sense of the meaning of Christmas?
For me, it would be, well, it's all of these things that people will celebrate, and there's commercial Christmas, but there's also the faith element of it. And ultimately, it's about a baby born, but a baby born with a mission, a baby born with a purpose. And for me, it's very much about a child born who is Christ, the Son of God, the Messiah, born to bring us peace, born to bring us salvation, born to bring us to a new level of learning to live as human beings here, and hopefully as we journey towards the next life. But yeah, so that's about that baby with that mission.
Right. But what comes after the baby, of course, is the religion,
yep,
the institutions, the Catholic Church being one of the oldest institutions with regard to the Christian faith. Of course, there are also the Orthodox churches and so on and so forth. That other dimension of Christianity, which is not about the religion and the faith, but it's also about the institution. How would you like people to view the way those two things come together?
Well, I think in anything you're going to have an institution. Institutions exist because something's got to hold things together. The reality is, however, that there is also the faith element, which is beyond an institution. I am a priest and I'm a part of the institution. I can't run away from that. But I also have my own relationship with God that is, yes, part of that, but is also linked to the fact that the institution is not just an institution in terms of a hierarchy, but also in terms of people. And I'm part of a whole load of people that have shared views and also have differences in the way that we look at things. So
right, and that actually is interesting for those who've watched the Netflix series, film, is the binaries that are operating in that film, which have to do with conservatism and reform, a priest who wants to, or a man of God who wants to affirm the universality of the message and its unchanging nature, versus somebody who's talking about relevance. And it seems to be all institutions, political ones, religious ones, grapple with those tensions. For you, the church has been in the limelight for many years recently, scandals and so on and so forth. How do you make sense of the kind of like the rootedness of the church and the reality of human society?
Well, I think the reality is that we need to recognize that, yes, there have been scandals, there have been good things as well. I think, the media will pick up on the scandals, but, will not laud the church for the good things that it does, and there's lots that goes on every day hidden. But I think what we need to recognize that if there is a scandal, we need to face it, squarely. We need to face it with truth, and to recognize that, yeah, there are times that we have to say, we've made a mistake, we're sorry, and we need to work towards change so that these things don't recur.
I want to ask you about this other reality of Christianity, is that there are many different institutions, there are different traditions. Perhaps the smallest of which would be the Orthodox churches in Malaysia. Then the Catholic Church is quite large. The mainstream Protestant churches and the evangelical churches. How do you manage those differences? How does the Christian community as a whole relate to each other?
Well, they are at an institutional level. There is the Christian Federation of Malaysia, which consists of, yes, the Catholic Church, the Council of Churches of Malaysia, and also the NECF, the National Evangelical Christian Fellowship. So those are three kind of blocks that work at a hierarchy, at the level of the hierarchy. But I think there's also a lot that happens at a local level. I mean, in Shah Alam, there's a pastors' fellowship that, you know, recently came together with, you know, for a Christmas celebration. And I think
and these were pastors from different churches, different
yes,
traditions.
and together with an MP who called us all to join him in one of the areas. And so the Shah Alam churches went together, and we were quite happy to be part of that. There I don't see a question of differences. You know, I see that we've probably got a lot more to share than to see in terms of differences. I mean, the primaries are similar, same actually. So I think that's important to recognize. Yes, there may be things on the periphery that we disagree, but I think what can we do in terms of work where harmony can exist, you know, and also sometimes there may be the need for hard talk, you know, to see.
And the reason I ask, you know, Sharaad, is because in many ways when we talk about interfaith dialogue, we're always talking about blocks of communities, and they're always Christians and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and all that. But we don't think about the internal divisions of those communities, and sometimes very, very intense divisions. So, I mean, you might find commonality with somebody from a different faith more than somebody within your own faith community.
Certainly.
Because of your tendency, a more inclusivist view as opposed to a more exclusivist approach. Where do you think the Christian community is? I mean, has it grown? I mean, what are the real conversations going on within your community today?
I think we're far more open towards everybody, you know. I mean, once upon a time, the Catholic Church would have been rather inward, thinking of itself in a kind of, you know, we're the best sort of church sort of thing. I think today we're recognizing that we need to work with everybody and not just Christians, okay? To recognize each and every person as a sister and a brother, and what commonalities can we work together with, you know? Not forgetting that, yes, there will be things that we disagree with, and we need to recognize that, you know. I mean, let's not run away and pussyfoot that. But I think we should work more and more with what we can work together with and build on that. You know, bridges rather than walls.
Okay,
yeah.
That's a great way to segue. Going to be right back on this Christmas special. Stay tuned to Consider This. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Sharaad KUTTAN. With me, Father Gerard Teravium, who is parish priest with the Church of Divine Mercy at Shah Alam. I wanted to ask you about the idea of moral leadership. We are, you know, in kind of Malaysia Baru, and I know it's almost 2 years into Malaysia Baru, there's a lot of talk about political leadership. But what does moral leadership mean? And I sometimes think that we mistake religious figures or people who use the religion as an idiom when talking about politics as that kind of moral leadership. But could moral leadership be something other than that? Could it be something about grappling with the difficult trade-offs or the idea of consequences of our actions and so on and so forth? What does morality even mean beyond, you know, the do's and don'ts? Yeah,
certainly it's not just about the thou shalt nots. You know, very often that's how often religion is portrayed as, and rather negatively actually. I think if we recognize that thou shalt, thou shalt be a person of peace, of justice, of truth, of love, of joy, those are values that I think we all would share. And we would all probably be able to look into our religious traditions and find the reason why we should be all of these things and more. So I think the danger, I think religious leaders, and I am one, are important. We're their part of that. But I think each person also has to look within and to recognize that God also leads us individually. And we need to discern the voice of God wherever God is leading each one individually as well.
Well, so in practical terms, right? And I think, do your congregants come to you to help them solve the practical problems that they face? Or when they're trying to weigh up the issues of a national level or even global ones, say for climate change being one of them, do they come to you? Are they asking you for leadership or asking you to help discern what the divine plan might be?
Yes, individually, an individual might come to me and say, hey, look, this is what's happening in my life. What do I do? And I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm going to perhaps ask the right questions and perhaps prod them to think in a different way, that ultimately they will realize for themselves what is it that they are finding themselves called to do. Because otherwise the danger can be I'm seen as the guru that has all the answers, and I don't have the answers, because ultimately the individual has to know where God is leading them. But on a bigger scale as well, okay, there are some things that, okay, you talked of climate change. We've got, the Pope's come out with this encyclical Laudato Si, and, in the local church we have been, spending, this is the second year in a series of 3 years that we are spending to push that idea of environmental change, and what are we doing as individuals, as communities, and beyond our own community to work with people of goodwill as to how we can, preserve or take back what we've lost, actually, in terms of recognizing that we are called to be, we're not owners of it all. We are called to look after the earth.
Right, stewards, I think is
stewards, yeah, stewards is the word I was looking for, right, thanks.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this, though. It seems to me sometimes the impulse that people have is to look for certainties, right? They want moral leadership in terms of the pronouncements of certain certainties. What you're presenting to me now is an idea of an engagement, which isn't full of certainties, or that is about putting the moral responsibility on the person asking the question to make that decision. Is that something that goes down well with your congregation? They think, well, we pay you the big bucks.
Well, they don't pay me the big bucks. They don't pay me the big bucks. But I will say this, it's very easy to get answers from somebody else. But, you've got to take personal responsibility for your life. I'm not there to tell you what you want to do or what you need to do. I'm there perhaps to bring maybe the faith dimension into those questions that you might be asking and saying, hey, have you considered this in the light of scriptures, in the light of what's happening around you? Would you consider this, Would you consider this?
In fact, this is precisely the show for us to consider. Is there a shift? Was the church always like this? Was it always so open? Did it have this kind of thinking and approach always?
No, I think, much earlier we would have been quite black or white, or black and white. There was sort of a certainty of where you were going, and this is what you should do, and, keep the rules and the rules will keep you. But I think today we are recognizing that personal responsibility is very important, and that needs to permeate all of us, and so quick answer to this, no, the church hasn't been like that always. But today I think more and more we're being invited to see where is God asking us as individuals, as communities, as churches, as a nation even, how are we going to respond to situations that are happening in our lives? And there are new situations that are arising all the time. So what is it that I'm called to do? I mean, you know, there are no rule books for new things that, you know, we might be able to pick up some things, but not necessarily so.
And I wonder about this also, because it seems that people perhaps look at religion today more like a supermarket of possibilities, right? So they can pick and choose. They might be born into a tradition, but they don't have to remain in it. There are very few, perhaps, social sanctions to when you do leave, right, and you choose another religion. Is there pressure? Because there are obviously Christian traditions where this kind of openness is not necessarily the you know, the norm, and people go and somebody's willing to give or peddle certainties. Do you ever feel the pressure to kind of deal with that? Those churches that might be out there saying, we know the truth, and I'll tell you exactly what you should do, and this is how to do it, 1, 2, 3, and you'll get to heaven.
I believe in the truth. I'm not going to sell something that is not something that I'm not convinced of. Okay, so I'm going to point you the way, but I'm not going to say this is the way and this is the only way, you know, that you need to do. You need to do, get to wherever you need to get to. I think, you know, to push certainties onto people's. Of course, there are certain things that, yeah, you know, as church, as religions, we will point to things. But when it comes to individual lives and how we apply things to our lives, we have also got to look at our situations and what's happening in there. I think, you know, the reality is that, you know, we're far more complex than just to say, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, you know, no.
Right. I mean, to be fair to all sides, I mean, liberals like myself and secular-minded people like myself also have our certainties, and perhaps sometimes we don't embrace doubt. And I wonder if you could just speak to the issue of doubt, and how does doubt play a role in the life of somebody who's religious? Is it bad to have doubts?
I don't think it's bad to have doubts. I think the reality is that we will always have a certain amount of doubt. But I hope it's also there's the same amount of hope and trust, you know. I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. I don't, you know. And so there are doubts that can come negatively into my thinking. But the thing I also have to do is that I know God is in control, you know. And if He's in control, then I'm okay, because He's going to look after whatever it is. It might be that it's not going to be an easy way for me. You know, I mean, God being in control doesn't mean it's going to be very easy, or, you know, the path is going to be smooth. It may be that I may have to take the path that's less, you know, normal, the path less taken, but God will be there to give us strength, courage along the way.
Okay. And now let's take a short break. We'll be back with Consider This. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Sharaad. With me, Father Gerard. He's with the Church of Divine Mercy at Shah Alam. We're talking about Christmas because, of course, today is Christmas. As a Christian in Malaysia, you know, part of a minority community, but significant, I believe in Sarawak, Christians might actually make up the majority. We're about 9% of the population nationally, but it's not evenly distributed. You have a Bahasa Malaysia service at Shah Alam. How did that evolve? What is it you were responding to when Bahasa Malaysia became a language for the church?
Well, the reality in the Church of the Divine Mercy was the reality that there were a lot of people from both Sarawak and Sabah coming to church, some of whom were not conversant in English as much as, you know, they would be at home with the service. And so it was just basically responding to a need. And that need has seen itself, you know, pan out in the fact that more have come. And we're happy to be there because they are part of the local church as well. I mean, the reality is that a lot of Sarawakians and Sabahans have moved to the peninsula. You know, they're part of the local landscape and very much a part of the church landscape. I mean, we're not the only church that is responding in this way. A lot of other churches have had to have a Bahasa Malaysia service, and the reality is that West Malaysians also speak Bahasa. I mean, you know, that is our national language and we've grown up with it, so why shouldn't we be comfortable to pray in a language that we've grown up using?
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting because the little I know of church history is that the service used to be in Latin before Vatican II was a major reform process within the church. So again, you know, for me, as somebody who's not religious, but thinking about how institutions change, how do they respond? And I know that the pontiff and the Pope Francis himself is seen as a harbinger of change for the church and reform. For you, what are the major things that the church needs to do in the 21st century to remain relevant, to speak to people's needs, to be a haven in a rather heartless world?
Well, in this country particularly, I think we have to see the need to work with people of all faiths and none. You know, the reality is that there are people of goodwill everywhere, and you know, we need to be tackling problems and issues together rather than saying this is a Catholic view, you know, whereas it might be a view that's fairly universal or fairly widespread, and to see that, you know, why do we have to have a sectarian view all the time? You know, so I think that's one of it. But wherever there are issues, I mean, I don't think we want to be, particularly as a minority, in any case, we wouldn't be able to deal with things by ourselves alone, you know. Perhaps we might be able to point to issues that need attention and hopefully work with people that will, you know, join us in those issues.
Do you think, you know, on balance, that there are sufficient numbers of people, goodwill, willing to, you know, to engage, that are not driven by mistrust? Because there seems to be a real trust deficit issue for Malaysia on all kinds of levels, never mind interfaith dialogue. I mean, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful, but also recognizing the reality that, yes, some people are still scared. You know, I mean, I think some people come from a sense of, you know, we're right, everybody is wrong. You know, and sometimes also, you know, the politics doesn't help. You know, the politics divides very often, and that is a hard thing. But I think when you go down to the grassroots, where people have lived in harmony all the time, you know, I mean, it's suddenly that we are getting issues and, you know, people are being divided and, you know, pushed away. I think, you know, I am hopeful, but I realize it takes time to rebuild trust, and it takes a lot of effort, you know, and hopefully there are other institutions, government groups, NGOs, and whatever also that might be helpful in that process.
What would you like to see happen in the next year or two that would be a concrete leg up for interfaith dialogue, for mutual understanding? Where could it happen? Where do you think it would best happen most effectively?
I'm not really sure, but I mean, one of the things that comes to my mind is that when you know, somebody comes with something that's destructive, that, you know, impinges on another religious belief, somebody who is rude and ugly, I wish, you know, the persons concerned, whoever, you know, whether it's the law or whatever, I mean, you know, why aren't they being dealt with? You know, you get people saying rubbish, and yet nobody seems to bat an eyelid, and, you know, you may scream all you like, but some people seem to be left alone to continue their rubbish.
Okay, and I'm not going to guess at who you might or might not be referring to, but what about this idea that now we're moving into a much more democratic space, that we in fact have to learn to deal with that rather than shut it down through fear and police powers? That, I mean, democracy is a very noisy place, right? Democracy is messy. Is that something that your congregants, yourself, do you want? I mean, are you willing to deal with the messiness?
It is messy. And I think we need to hear divergent views, okay? But not to the point that other views are kept down while certain views are allowed to go on just as if nothing happened. You know, I think we all need to be heard, but we all also need to learn to listen. And the listening part is hard because a lot of us want to say our piece and, you know, push our agenda. But what is it about the listening, you know? Because I think there's a lot to learn from others, of other groups, other viewpoints, and, you know, that might lead us on in our own journeys as well.
You have been, you did a little television show, I think, when you talked with a Muslim religious leader. Those are very rare. Most of the discourse, I think, today is happening on social media. Are you on social media? What's your view? I mean, how, because there is a lot of noise and perhaps a lot of prejudice being pushed through in social media.
True. But, you know, it's a great way of getting information out. I mean, you know, I mean, somebody teased me the other day and said I'm the Facebook priest, you know.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, because I push out stuff, you know, viewpoints that are, you know, stuff, I might share stuff, I might write stuff, or I might share stuff that I'm working in a group with. But I think it's important for us to be able to, it's lovely to be able to have all these different viewpoints and sometimes to see what people who don't agree with you are speaking of. And sometimes, hey, there's something there that I could learn from, you know, that I hadn't considered before, you know. So I think, you know, I'm all for allowing things to be out there, but I think we need to respect persons, you know. We can disagree on issues, but persons need to be respected.
Right.
Dignity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your views of Christmas and Christianity, of religion, and its role in making us a better society. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Right.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas. I've been speaking to Father Sharaad Teravium, parish priest of the Church of the Divine Mercy at Shah Alam. That's all we have for Consider This on Christmas Day. I'm wishing you all the best. Come back with us tomorrow. I'm Sharaad KUTTAN.